My camera's having issues. Because my camera's having issues. I probably should have gone with the one with the aluminum body. Yes, well, the birds are chirping, it's annoying, and I'm fat and hairy, and we're here to talk about letting your nerd flag fly. I don't think I have a nerd flag. People don't call me a nerd. At least not to my face. They're afraid I'll eat them. One of the many advantages to being, well, this. But here we are in my workroom. I am setting up a drafting table behind me where I'm going to have my old computer running so I can draw my comic strip, which no one reads. So I guess you could call me something of a cartoonist, which is nerdy in and of itself. But in order to understand this, let's talk for a moment about the 64-year history of the word nerd. See, the word nerd came into play in 1950 with the Dr. Seuss book, If I Ran the Zoo. The kid goes to the zoo, he's unhappy with the animals, and he talks about the animals he would go get if he ran the zoo. And one of these animals was a nerd. Now, this was not some dude in a faded plaid shirt with a pocket protector and the glasses with the piece of tape there, because I don't get the piece of tape thing either. But that's beside the point. It was not some weird fat dude like me with a huge comic book collection. Back in 1950, comic books were a lot cooler, as I recall. Not that I lived back then. But you see, comic books were really cool during the Second World War. They retained some coolness, I think, in the 50s, where they lost popularity, or was it the 60s, and people saw them as unmoral, and then they gained a resurgence at some point. Probably in the 60s and 70s, where I do recall there was a thing about them using some psychedelic art. Andy Warhol, the famous artist, drew Superman. So yes, the word nerd. And there's a big furry thing in the background. Don't worry about him. He's harmless. Any case, so nerd, there was an alternative spelling with a U at one point, which Philip K. Dick claimed ownership to, but they found out that's not true. Anyway, nerd at some point after its coinage by Dr. Seuss began to take on a meaning similar to drip or square, meaning this person who is uncool or unpleasant. Because drip, slang for drip, you figure it's got to come from, you know, you got a drip in your sink. It's drip, drip. It calls attention to itself, and you don't like it. So this is what a nerd was at the time. It was something that was unpleasant to be around. And then nerd took on its more modern interpretation as being someone who was overly intellectual. Someone of greater intelligence, but had an inability to interact socially. So you were a nerd, you probably liked comic books because you could take solace in them. You liked reading and literature, but you also liked comic books because you realized what a great form of literature they were. I mean, you could see some really cool things in comic books. You can also see some really horrible things in comic books. I only have about 300 of those things, and I'm told that's a very small collection compared to most geeks. So, I don't know too much about them. But they're a respectable form of literature. They really are. I mean, there are things to be said. There's an art form here. So, these nerds and nerd culture was secondary, and nerds were the kind of people you were unpleasant to be around. But then, of course, people realized that nerddom was marketable, which is why you have things today like Comic-Con. And now, because the nerd demographic is a demographic who buys a lot of stuff, you know, I mean, look at it this way. You have your jocks. Your jocks buy a lot of stuff. You don't think of it that way, but they do. I have a lot of chin shadow. Anyway, they buy baseball cards, they buy football cards, they buy jerseys, they buy helmets, they buy weird bowls and glasses to drink their beer out of, so on and so forth. All kinds of memorabilia for sports. But if your team loses, you don't feel like buying anything. But in the movie, Superman can always win. Silence, ye hairy beast! Anyway, so here's the thing, is that being a nerd is something with a lot of memorabilia. Oh, come on, are you serious? Yes, the chair is creaking. I'm fat. Stop that. What I'm saying here, basically, is that now a nerd is someone who's overly enthusiastic about collecting crud. So no, I don't let my nerd flag fly anymore. Am I saying anything intelligent? No, I don't think I am. Look. Be into what you're into. And the whole nerd label is something other people really want to impress upon us as to what a nerd is. And people will be like, well, you can't be a nerd if you don't like Batman, or if you don't like Spider-Man, or if you don't like Harry Potter, or... Labels. I hate them. There are people who nerd out over video games, and then nerd out to be overly enthusiastic. And that's cool. If that's your thing, I think it's great that there's people who have the vintage Nintendo and a full set of games, and they play them, and they enjoy themselves, and they're happy. I don't care one way or the other, and the hairy beast is brushing my leg. That feels really creepy when I'm not paying attention to it. But, bleh. You really are annoying at this moment. You know that. Okay, you know that and you're happy? Okay. Ha! So, what I'm trying to say is that if you like the label nerd, go with it. If you don't like the label nerd, don't go with it. I don't consider myself a nerd, and I think what people really mean by nerd is fanboy. Fanboy is non-gender specific. They've never really come out with a fan person, although I guess it's worse if you're a guy, I think. So if you're overly in love with something, no matter how bad it is, you're a fanboy. If you like it the appropriate amount, you're probably a nerd if that's how you want to go for it. And, yeah, I let my nerd flag fly by creating fan fiction, I guess. Enjoying the videos of my youth. And being annoyed by a big orange furry thing. So, I've rambled enough, and I've got to turn my dishwasher on, which is going to make a lot of noise. So I'm going to let you go. And I'm Richard Neal for Random Street Theater. Please like and subscribe. Check the description for links to my comic that no one reads. Peace out, and let whatever flag fly that makes you happy, so long as you're not hurting anyone else.